Hey, welcome back, y'all. This is going to be video number 2 in the series of what I hope will only be 2 videos, but who knows? God willing, Gretchen Whitmore executive orders willing, and the vicissitudes of COVID willing. I'll be seeing you sooner, hopefully, rather than later. And I guess it behooves me to mention very quickly. I just wanted to give a shout out. Mad props from the hood to my main man SW. I'm not going to mention your name because you didn't give me permission to do so. But you know who you are. I appreciate the loyalty. I appreciate the dedication. I appreciate your willingness to actually express some favorable sentiments regarding the feedback that you had concerning the last video that I put out there. So I appreciate that, and that's a great way to ingratiate yourself to your instructor. Not that that really matters because I'm not much of a sycophant, so I don't really abide people like that, anyways. But if you want to give me some feedback, I'd appreciate that because I'm always trying to improve upon my A game, and I know there's a lot that is lacking and a lot that is deficient about these videos. And I'm sorry for the cheap special effects. I'm sorry for my outlandish antics, but I'm trying to make this as theatrical and engaging and hopefully entertaining as possible because I know this is actually the material, I think anyways, this is the kind of material that actually does in fact lend itself to theatricality, and it does in fact lend itself to the sorts of things that we were talking about last time. Because and I'm going to make these points when I actually hopefully see you guys within a week from today, because today is actually Monday, the August 24th. It's the day after Sunday. Also known as the day after Sunday, the day after last night when I actually did the first recording. So hopefully I will be seeing you guys in a week from today, and when that, if that eventuality does in fact transpire, in the hope that it does, then I will reiterate some of these sentiments then. But what I should say is that history is one of those subject matters that is essentially, fundamentally, in its essence, it is something that is intrinsically very dramatic and is intrinsically something that is very, I think, engaging, because it's telling the story of dramatic events in history, dramatic events that have transpired before we came into existence. And it's telling that story in a way that is vivid and visceral and evocative and hopefully demonstrative of concepts that are actually important to us to understand. Because, as the old saying goes, those who forget the past are condemned to repeat it, right? And that's one of the reasons why we should aspire to learn the history of the world, because it is actually cyclical and it does actually recapitulate itself, and we do see trends and we do see recurrences throughout time. And this is a point that I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna make this much more strenuously and much more vociferously when I actually see you guys for the first time, whenever that will be. But hopefully, I'm planning on that being a week from today on Monday. But suffice it to say, it's something that I want you guys to be cognizant of the fact that this is not just learning stuff for the sake of learning stuff, for the sake of getting a good grade, for the sake of matriculating through this college experience and having a successful time while you're at it, right? It's also something that you should actually take something away from this class, all right? And that's actually the question that you should ask yourself about every class that you enroll in: is what am I getting out of this, besides the fact that I'm earning college credit that goes in furtherance of my particular curriculum and my degree, whatever program you happen to be enrolled in, right? What am I getting out of this intrinsically? Okay, that's the question that I think is really actually much more dispositive than what am I getting out of this in terms of the credits that I'm paying for, because you know you're going to get that, right? That's a guarantee. Okay, that's a foregone conclusion. You're going to get those credits, but what are you going to get in addition to that? And hopefully this is going to go into those classes that gives you something more than merely an educational experience, than merely the satisfaction of curriculum requirements, which you may have as a prerequisite to this, that, and the other thing, right? That this is going to be a class that instructs you on things that are not just germane to the topic of history, right, but also germane to other topics, and therefore it gives you a versatile education that has diversity and utility to it, and can apply to other disciplines in a way that actually makes it even more fungible than it otherwise would be. Just a quick uh, remark as to the formatting of today. I realized that I spent almost 2 hours on camera last time, and that was, if it wasn't a long time for you, it certainly was a long time for me, or perhaps the other way around. But that's a long time to be standing talking to oneself in a rather lonely and isolated environment. I'm not concerned about it. I'm not really apprehensive about it. It's not as though I experience any trepidation standing here before this camera, but it's a long time to be standing talking to oneself, right? I could just period and leave it at that, full stop, right? I don't need to continue on and qualify that any further. The other concern is that I don't want to disenfranchise or alienate any of you because you think that I'm talking way too much and I'm saying perhaps not enough, and this is just too extensive and it's too elaborate and it's too eloquent, and there's just too much vernacular. We got to cut this down, and we're going to minimize this. Okay, I understand that, right? So what I'm gonna try to do today, whether or not this actually happens remains to be seen, but what I'm going to aspire to do is I'm going to try to consolidate this to make it more concise and abbreviated in terms of the formatting. And I'm going to try to deliver that which is really critical and that which is really essential to your understanding of the topics in a shorter period of time that is more condensed and more concise, and therefore of greater utility to you because you have to spend less time actually listening to this and watching me, but you're getting as much out of this as you probably got out of the experience last night, if not more. That's what I hope for. Whether or not that actually happens, we'll see. I'll probably end up getting distracted and go down the rabbit hole in different directions and digress all over the place. But that's what I hope to do. So there are some slides, all right, that you guys should be aware of, and you should actually be interfacing with these slides simultaneous with this presentation, because having the slides there will give you some context to the remarks that I'm actually making, and it will be more cognizable to you because you'll actually be able to listen to what I'm saying, see what I'm doing here, right? And reconcile that with what's actually on the slides themselves. So you have kind of a roadmap and you're able to ascertain where it is I'm trying to go. Whether or not we get there, we'll see. So I think you guys, I think I left off somewhere around slide 16 of the first series of slideshows. All right, so PowerPoint number one, all right, PowerPoint slideshow number one, and I sent these slides out to you. And actually, this is slide number 17. If you guys can see it here, I don't know why I even bother doing this because I could just say it's slide number 17. You can do this for yourself, but there you have it. Okay, so slide number 17 is where we're going to start off at, and so this is the second to last slide for the first PowerPoint series. So if you don't have that up yet, why don't you go ahead and take the time, bring that up, interface with your system and get PowerPoint running and bring that up. And so we're on slides number 17. So last time, okay, we were talking about the bifurcation, right? The way in which we discriminate between the two fundamental social constructs that were essentially the primary ways in which people would come together and organize themselves socially. And I refer to this as a social construct because this is kind of an anthropological term of art. It's also a term of art that we historians use. And a social construct, just essentially that means people coming together, living together, cooperatively, collaboratively, in furtherance of a common purpose. All right, so you're coming together, you're cohabitating, you're living in the same area with people who have similar desires, similar goals, similar objectives, and you're hopefully working together for the mutual advantage of everybody collectively together. That is a good, functional, fungible, utilitarian definition of what a social construct actually is. And we've talked about two of them so far, okay? And if you guys remember anything from the hour and 40 some odd minutes that I recorded last night, and I've already put it up there on YouTube, then I think the one thing that you absolutely must have hopefully taken away from that, if you took nothing else away from it, there were these two organizations, these two groups. One was called the hunters and gatherers, right? And then the others were, I referred to them as the agrarian type people, variously referred to in different ways, but the agrarian social construct, right? So you got the agriculturalists, right, over here, and then you got the hunter-gatherers over here. We talked all about these things, these different qualities that are associated with these different groups, and be able to discriminate and differentiate between them, be able to tell me exactly or as precisely as you possibly can what qualities differentiate these different groups of people, and why the agriculturalists are actually much better suited, have a greater aptitude and propensity for developing along civilizational terms when contrasted with the hunter-gatherers, who don't really have much, okay? And the little that they do have is very, very hard to get. So we talked about all that. So I don't want to recapitulate any of that because I spent so much time talking about that last night that I think that's probably it's going to be redundant, it's going to be superfluous, and it's going to be excessive. So let's just get right into this next slide, which is slide number 17. All right, so I got this question here. Okay, how did the first cities come into existence? Because what we're talking about right now is the foundations of human civilization. All right. I said last time that this is a class that doesn't just concern itself with history, but it also concerns itself with prehistory or proto-history. So we're going back even before civilization even began, right? Before there was a structure, a superstructure to civilization, before people were producing art and music and language and all the other sorts of things that are cultural staples that we associate with culture, either modern or ancient. We're talking about the very foundations, the very rudimentary sort of superstructure, how these people came together, how they coalesced, and how they actually established what became a greater enterprise, right? And so before you have civilization, before you have empire, before you have great sovereign states, you need to have a group of people living together. You need to have a city. Okay. Now, what are the prerequisites to establishing a city? All right, this may seem like a fairly dumb question because it probably lends itself to a fairly intuitive response, but it's actually a little bit more complex than you may think on first glance. All right, so what do you need to establish a city? Well, you need to have an abundant population, right? You need to have a certain uh, number of people that are actually there to be able to say that this qualifies as a city as opposed to just some people living out there farming in a village, right? So yeah, I don't know, that's kind of an arbitrary distinction. I mean, at what point does a town or does a village metastasize into a city? I don't know. That's sort of a rhetorical question, but we can argue about the numbers. But what we cannot disagree on is that cities are, in general, I think this is axiomatic, are pretty big places in terms of the population, right? So you need a large population. Well, how do you get to a large population if you're living in ancient Mesopotamia, right? Or ancient Babylon, or ancient Ur, or ancient Acadia, or ancient Egypt, or wherever the hell you happen to be, right? How do you get to a large population? Well, you need to have an agricultural basis that is sustainable, that is prolific, that is highly productive, that can actually provide subsistence level provisions for the population that is actually living within in and around that city. Okay, so you need to have a sustainable agricultural output that is sufficient to support and sustain however many people you have populated in your particular city, right? So that's the first consideration. Secondly, right, that presupposes the fact that you actually have abundant agricultural surplus, okay? Because agriculture is not just about just getting enough food to get us by for the next day, right? That's not the way it works. If you know anything about farming, right, you'll know that it's about going out there and it's about harvesting, right? Reaping what you sow, proverbially, right? Literally, actually, reaping what you sow. Okay, and when you reap, right, when you're out there reaping, right, because you got this thing, I think it's like a scythe they call it. It sounds like Sith, but it's like this big thing with a sickle on the end of it, and you go out there and you reap the wheat or the barley or whatever it is you're reaping, and then you collect that stuff up, right, and then you got a surplus value, okay, and that's what these early cities had. They had a surplus value of agricultural products, right? So more than they actually needed just to subsist off, right? They had more than they needed just to feed themselves and their families and their friends and the people who were living around the city. They had so much so, right? They had an abundance of it, right? Or what I refer to as a surplus value, which is more than what you actually need. Okay, and if you have more grain or crops or millet or barley or rice or whatever than you actually need, what can you do with that? Well, you can go out there and you can trade that, you can sell that, and you can make some kizash. All right, that's what you can do with that. All right, so in a way, agriculturalists, right, the agrarian social construct is not just optimized for success in the sense that it's more stable and it's more reliable and it's more dependable and it's more secure, right? It's more secure, like me. Okay, you see that? Check that out, right? I'm like the agriculturalist because I got security up in this, all right? Now, the agriculturalists do actually have a good level of security, right? They have a good level of social stability. They've got a good level of internal security. And the reason I say that is because the if you think about the things that are necessary to have social order, social stability, to maintain whatever people are doing, the continuation of the homeostasis of civilization, right? What you need to have are people that are well fed, right? That are well provided for, that have the essential needs that every human being needs, right? And if you guys have studied psychology or social psychology, I think this is more social psychology than it is psychology, right? You'll remember there was something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. All right, not Pavlov, right? I always get those two guys confused, right? Pavlov was the guy with the dog. He had the bell, and he was ringing the bell, and the dog would salivate when he conditioned the dog to actually respond to the dog food that he putting out there. Maslov, however, was a Russian. I think he was a sociologist and a psychologist. He was one or the other, maybe a little bit of both. but he posited that you have, we all collectively, humanity, people, biologically, we have these needs, we have these fundamental needs, right? And they start with the most essential needs, right? The most rudimentary, fundamental, instinctual needs that are most inextricably associated with just the maintenance and the continuation of ourselves, right? That we cannot do without these things, all right? So some of these needs, right, include food, shelter, right? Food and shelter is, it's kind of like a pyramid, right? That's the way they conceptualize this, right? So at the bottom of the pyramid, you guys know what a pyramid looks like, right? I hope it looks like this, okay? Well, it doesn't exactly. It looks kind of more like, I can't exactly do it because I'm not triangular, but it looks okay. Well, on the basic level of the pyramid, right, are the fundamental needs, all right, upon which the other less essential needs, the ancillary needs, are predicated, right? So on the base level of the pyramid, you have food, you have shelter, you have physical security, right? These are the basic needs, biological, human, instinctual, primal needs that all of us have. They are inalienable to the species. Okay. Now above that, right? You have the need for social engagement. You have the need for personal fulfillment. You have the need for satisfaction, self-realization, and actualization. Right. You have more metaphysical needs. Right. But the thing that the agricultural construct allows for, right? And at the very fundamentally, right? And essentially, right? Irreducibly, it can at least provide for those essential needs at the bottom of Maslow's pyramid, right? It provides food, safety, stability, security, okay? It provides those things. You got a roof over your head, you got food on your plate, and for most people, you know what? Hey, maybe that's all I need, right? That's all I need, okay? As far as I'm well fed and I'm well situated in this place, right? And I got sufficient security from the elements and sufficient security from people who want to come in here and attack me. That's enough, okay? And that's what the agriculturalist had, all right? And that's something that the tribal organization, the hunter gatherers running around in the loincloth chasing after the lions and the tigers and the bears, they didn't have that, okay? Um, so going back to the point about cities, right? So you need a large agricultural surplus. You need to have abundant provisions of agriculture, right? Now how do you produce whatever it is, X, Y, and Z? How do you produce grain or rice or whatever, right? Whatever agricultural product you happen to be harvesting and cultivating. What is that dependent upon? What is a prerequisite to the production of an overabundance, a surplus value of agriculture? Well, you need to have a climate that is conducive to the production of agriculture. You need to have sufficient rainfall, right? Precipitation is absolutely necessary because there's this thing that we learned about in biology and chemistry, biology, the natural sciences, called photosynthesis, all right? And photosynthesis was just as true 5,000 years ago as it is true today, right? And so you need light, you need light from the sun, and you need precipitation, you need water, right? And what was I saying? There was this ancient sort of form of climate change that was transpiring at this time, right? The snows of yesteryear, the glaciers were receding and they were retreating northwards. And in the wake of the remnant, what was left behind from the glaciers was a much less arid climate, a climate that had greater amounts of rainfall, a climate that was warmer, a climate that was more humid, a climate that altogether was much more conducive to the proliferation of agriculture, the production of farm type products. Okay, and so that's what you need, right? And if you look at the places where early civilization began, you will see that there is a commonality. You will see that there is a unifying, a common denominator. Let's call it, right? A common anthropological, historical, ecological denominator, right? And there's actually a couple of those denominators that have those qualities about them, right? Number one, if you look at these places, these ancient cities that began to promulgate and proliferate into empires and the origins of great states, you will see that they were all similarly situated in certain ways, right? They were all in areas that were, from a meteorological or climate standpoint, were highly conducive to the production of abundant agriculture, right? So they had the necessary rainfall amount. They were sufficiently humid and sufficiently warm, and had seasonal variation to the extent that was necessary to support photosynthesis and the cycle of the crops, right? And if you look at these cities, right, and the cities that I've listed on this PowerPoint slide, you guys can refer to this right now. I'm going to look over here because I got to cheat because I can't actually remember what I said. Rome, Thebes, Memphis, and Babylon. All right, so Rome is in Italy, Thebes and Memphis are in Egypt, and Babylon is in Mesopotamia, modern day Iraq. what do these cities have in common? Well, if you look at them on a map, right? If you go over here to my globe, which I'm not actually going to do because you guys can't see this, and this thing looks heavy and it's got a cord that it's attached to, so I can't bring it over here and show it to you. But if you look at this globe, right, or if you look at just Google Maps or whatever you want to bring up, you will see that those locations, right, Italy, Iraq or Mesopotamia at the time, and Egypt, especially along the Valley of the Kings there in central Egypt, right, they have certain ecological qualities that are very similar. Okay, and I'm not necessarily talking about what does Babylon look like right now in 2020, right, or what did it look like 50 years ago or 20 years ago, right? What Babylon is actually south of Iraq, or it's in Iraq. It's south of Baghdad. Okay, Saddam Hussein actually had a palace built near the ruins of Babylon because he wanted to be reminiscent of or nostalgic for the great empire and the great kingdom which was founded on that site, that city. Now, what do these places all have in common? Well, ecologically, they're very similarly situated, right? They all have abundant rainfall. They all have a climate that is highly conducive to the proliferation of agriculture, and most importantly, most critically, because if there's one thing they couldn't do without, it's this: they all are in reasonably close proximity to a large supply of fresh water. Okay, Rome, you have the Tiber. Okay, uh, Babylon, you have the Euphrates and the Tigris. Okay, and Memphis and Thebes, you have the Nile River. Okay, and these are all very large rivers. Okay, they're all freshwater rivers. You have sort of the water that mixes in the estuary when the Nile comes out and it flows into the Mediterranean. The same thing with the Tiber, but that's absolutely critical, okay? Because that is necessary. That is your capacity to actually irrigate your crops and therefore supply them with the water that they actually need to sustain and subsist off of is going to be contingent upon the availability and accessibility of water. And so if you don't have fresh water flowing from this river, okay, you're not going to be able to support the crop production. Ergo, you're not going to be able to support and sustain your population and grow that population to the point where you have enough people to actually diversify your economy, and you can do different things, and you can have different specialists, and you can have different expertise, and you become a multifaceted civilization that is far beyond the wildest dreams of the hunter gatherers, right? So you ultimately need, as a fundamental predicate, you need access to fresh water, because C is dependent on B is dependent on A, and A is the rivers in this particular diagram that I'm trying to elucidate here for you. Okay, let's talk about this business of metallurgy. You may have heard of this term, metallurgy. Okay, metallurgy is essentially just the science or the art, I guess the technique, the science of refining and amalgamating different types of metals. All right, making metal more durable, making it more resilient and robust, making it more viable, conferring greater utility upon it because it's stronger, it's more resilient. You're able to do more things with it, and hence we differentiate ancient civilizations by saying that certain real early civilizations, they were living in the Iron Age. Okay, and as the Iron Age began to progress, right, as people began to discover more things about how to actually blend different metals together and create new types of metal, right, well, then we entered into the Bronze Age, right, and so on and so forth. And so you have these different evolutions, you have these different iterations of civilization that use these different types of metals. And these different types of metals confer not just a greater utility upon the user and the producer and the manufacturer of the metals, right? But it also confers a particular strategic advantage. Right? So if you think about what you're using metal for, right? What are you doing before the advent of metal? Okay, who's not using metal? Well, hunter gatherers are not using metal because they don't have the requisite civilizational foundations and infrastructure to actually produce metal. They don't have the metal workers, they don't have the blacksmiths, they don't have the other people who deal with actually smelting and whatever it is you do to produce metal. And so they're running around with sticks and literally stones, right? Sticks and stones, okay? Stones, sharpened stones affixed to the end of a stick, right? And that's what they're doing, right? And then you have people who are savvy enough and who are sufficiently comprehending of the value and utility of metal, and they go out there and they find this stuff, they got this stuff called iron, right? And they're using iron in various applications. It's not just for farming, okay? People think about metals, and they think about the application that it has in certain agricultural contexts, right? And you could say, well, yeah, I could have this plow, right? A bronze plow is more efficient than an iron plow, which is better than a stone plow, because the iron is going to cut through the soil more efficiently, and it's going to move more quickly, and it's going to require less work and less force. And the same thing with the bronze in relation to the iron, and the same thing with the iron in relation to the stone. And so that's true, right? So by improving upon the efficacy of your metallurgy, by creating new types of metal, amalgamating existing forms of metal, and then creating a new type of metal that is stronger, more durable, more resilient, more robust, more able to actually endure the kinds of stress that it's going to be subjected to, right? Well, that makes these processes more efficient, okay? And so you make progress in a way incidental to the fact that you're discovering new things about how metal actually blends together and making new amalgamations. And amalgamation is just a fancy way of saying you're blending two different elements together. And what else can you do with metal, right? Well, you can make weapons of war, right? I can forge a metal. I can forge a bronze sword, or a iron axe, or a bronze shield, right? And that's why we refer to it as the Bronze Age, because these guys who were living in the Bronze Age, the Greeks, and um, the ancient Mesopotamians and the Egyptians and a lot of these other cultures, right? They were using bronze, all right? They were using the byproducts of bronze, all right? Things that they were manufacturing with this particular type of substance, and bronze was more durable and less brittle than other metals, right? That were weaker and more susceptible to actually breaking and cracking and all kinds of faults. And so, if you were a bronze civilization, okay, as opposed to an iron civilization, right? You were using a metal that was stronger and more durable, then you could not only would it be the case that you would be able to farm more efficiently, right? You could farm more efficiently, and therefore it's easier for you to actually produce more abundant agriculture. You have to spend less time farming. You can produce more for less time and less effort. Ergo, you can spend more time doing other things. You can spend time actually learning about how to create more metals, how to manufacture more weapons, how to think about how to go out there and destroy your adversary. Okay, so that's important. But you can also create weapons that are superior to the weapons of the people who you are trying to fight against and whose territory you're trying to dispossess them of, right? And so that's important too. That you want weapons that are strong, that are durable, that are resilient, that are able to actually go out there and withstand the forces of battle, okay? And they're not going to break when you go out there and you're engaging in sword fight, and you're fighting against some dude with a iron blade, and you break his blade in half because you got a bronze blade and yours is more strong than his, okay? So it's not about this. It's not necessarily the strongest warrior who wins, right? But it's the most evolved and the most technologically sophisticated, the most advanced warrior who wins. All right. So be smarter, be better, not necessarily stronger, right? But have better techniques and technology, and that will confer upon you a strategic advantage if you're talking about these ancient confrontations and conflicts between these ancient civilizations. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the let's talk a little bit about the well, we actually already talked about this, the cities requiring agricultural surplus, right? And how is that conducive to the production of a complex civilization, a complex society? Well, this goes back to what I said last night, but I'll just make the point again because it's an important one. If you have a lot of food, okay, if you have a lot of food, people aren't going hungry, right? And people don't have to spend all their time exclusively dedicated to the process of agriculture, right? You don't have to spend all of your time out there tilling the soil and irrigating the crops and aerating the soil and farming and pushing the plow around with the dogs or with the cattle or with the horse or with the ox or whoever else is towing your plow around. You can do that sometimes, right? And then you can dedicate some of your other time to doing other things that are actually more fruitful and advantageous from a civilization standpoint, right? Because you can go out there and you can specialize in different tasks. All right. How do we define civilization? Well, this is kind of an ambiguous and amorphous concept. I mean, different people. This is rather open to subjective interpretation. Different people have different conceptions of what civilization actually is. How you qualify civilization? What does it mean to say you're civilized? Well, I mean that has a certain connotation, but civilization is like I said, it's a more ambiguous term. I think civilization. I mean, I've got a definition of civilization, and it's on this slide, and I just refer you guys to this slide, but I'll go ahead and read it anyways because I'm holding it anyways. Civilization, as far as I am concerned, right, and as far as you're concerned too, because you're in this class, is a complex society within which class stratification exists. A unique culture has been created, and economic, military, or political forces facilitate expansion or influence. Okay, so you got some things going on with civilization. It's a complex society where class stratification exists. Class stratification just means that you got different people doing different things, and there's different utility function associated with the various physical jobs that these people are doing, right? So you got the blacksmith, you got the carpenter, you got the warrior, right? You got the farmer, you got the priest, you got the commander of the soldiers, right? You got different people who are specializing in different things, and depending on how exceptional and how significant and how critical that particular whatever it is their job happens to be in relation to the collective existence of the society as a whole, right? We confer different values upon those people, and we assign different levels of merit to them, and they accrue a certain level of prestige, which is contingent upon whatever, the utility function of whatever it is they're doing, and they make more money. There's different people making different money and different levels of income, and so what you see therefore is this coalescing of a society, of a civilization that is becoming much more evolved in a sense, because you're having different people doing different things, making different money, doing, branching out, and you're having different levels of socioeconomic stratification, which is what I referred to last time. And all that means is that you've got different people at different levels, different rungs, different echelons within the society. Okay, and they're making different money and they're doing different things, and the things that they do determine how much money they make and how much prestige they have within society as a whole. Right. And so we, look at. I mean, you want to know what socioeconomic stratification looks like? Just look around the United States right now. Just look around the contemporary U.S. All right, or the contemporary Western civilization. All right, and you have vast differences in income. Okay, if you look at how much people make, right, and the differences that exist between um, somebody who works as a physician, right, or somebody who works as an entrepreneur, and somebody who works as an adjunct instructor of history part time, right? But as I said, it's not about the money; it's about the glory, and it's about the whether or not you're having a good time at the end of the day. That's all that really matters. It's the intrinsic benefits, not the extrinsic ones. Don't never let anybody tell you differently. Um, okay, so that's the definition of civilization. Let's talk a little bit about these guys, nomadic nomadic pastoralists, right? And this is slide number 18, just so you know where it is I am. That kind of looks like that. I don't know again why I'm doing this, but I think slide 18 is enough to actually get you the proper orientation. So we're talking about when we're talking about the nomadic pastoralists, we're talking about societies that are highly mobile, okay, that are moving around all the time, and what the reason they're moving all the time, right? The reason they are itinerant, which means that you go around, you follow the work, you go with the work, right? I'm an itinerant instructor of history, okay, or I was until I found Gogobek, and they've given me a job that I've had now for the last 2 years, and thank God for them, right? But before that, I would go wherever the work takes me, and to an extent, I still do because I'm coming all the way up to the Key I'll teach you guys. But itinerant just means you're wandering around, right? You're going different places. You go wherever the work takes you, wherever it requires you to be, right? And the nomadic pastoralists were itinerant people. They were itinerant tribes, okay? And they were wandering around, right, in search not of teaching opportunities, right? They were wandering around in search of livestock, okay, and animals that could be domesticated, right? So that they could have those. Well, the term itself kind of implies, right, or alludes to what they're actually doing, right? What does it mean when I say nomadic? Okay, let's just break this down. Let's look at the etymology of the actual term. What does it mean when I say nomad? Who are you if you're a nomad? Okay, what are you doing if you're a nomad? Well, if you think about nomads, you tend to think that they're moving around a lot, right? A nomad in traditional Arabic society, in certain parts of Saudi Arabia before, well, the Arabian Peninsula, I should say, not just Saudi Arabia, but the Arabian Peninsula, before it became subjected to the influence of Islam, and indeed, actually, well after, there were people there known as the Bedouins, and there still are people actually there known as the Bedouins, and they ride around on camels, right? And they travel around, and they are itinerant, they're nomadic, right? Because they move around a lot, okay? So that's all nomadic implies, right? Pastoralist. What does a pastoralist mean? Well, again, think about the actual term, right? Think about the word, what we're actually saying when we say pastoralist, right? What's the root word? What's the predicate word? Pastor, right? Pastoral, right? What does it mean if you're living in a pastoral environment? It means it's a bucolic environment, right? It's an environment that is evocative of farming, okay? And you have a pastor, no, not a pastor, a pasture, right? Where you got these the fence set up here, and inside the fence, containing that fence, quarantining that fence, are sheep and goats and pigs and whoever else you got in there, right? And you got these domesticated animals that you sustain, right? And that you provide for, and that you not cultivate, but you I don't know what the proper term is with respects to animals. You don't grow animals. I guess you just keep animals. You maintain these animals, right? And so that's what these nomadic pastoralists are in the business of doing. Okay, and the reason they're moving around a lot is because they're going around and they're finding ground, or an ecological environment that is conducive, maximally conducive to the grazing of the animals that they keep and they maintain. Right, that's what they need. That's what they need to go and find. Right, and that's what they're moving around a lot. Now, the other thing that differentiates this particular group of people. All right, and this is I should have prefaced this all by saying that this is another type of social construct. Right. So we talked about the hunter gatherers, we talked about the agrarian people, we talked about the agriculturalists, right? We just talked about that just now. We just talked about that last night, right? And now you got these guys called nomadic pastoralists, right? And so they're different, right? They're different, right? Are they better necessarily than the hunter gatherers or the agriculturalists? Well, I'd say they're probably better than the hunter gatherers because they're much more efficient. Okay. And what separates the nomadic pastoralists from the hunter gatherers is that these guys have horses, and they're extremely proficient and adept and skilled at using horses. They're equestrians, right? What does it mean when I say that you're an equestrian, right? Well, it could mean a couple of things. If you were an ancient Rome and I said you were an equestrian, it meant that you were from the class that was immediately subordinate to the senatorial class, right? But that's sort of a culturally constructed definition, and that's actually not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the more generic term. An equestrian just means you're somebody that likes horses, okay? You like horses, or you know a lot about horses, or you ride horses, right? There's equestrians on Mackinac Island because that's the mode of transportation up there. And the nomadic pastoralists were very, and actually still are very good, skilled horsemen. Their horsemanship skills, it's not triage, it's not corsage. There's a special term, right? Dressage. That's what it is, right? Dressage. I'm glad I thought about that because I was going to say something stupid. Dressage, right, is the term for riding a horse in a way that is circumscribed to certain rules, right? They got these certain rules it's like just like figure skating, right? You got certain rules that you got to abide by when you go out there and you do the triple axel and the triple lutz and whatever the hell else they got, right? And if you got dressage, right, you got to be able to ride a horse in a certain way that is in conformity with the parameters of the show, right? They stipulate, well, you got to ride this horse at a gait, right, or a trot, right? The horse has got to be trotting, right? And then he's got to jump over this fence, and then he's got to go over there, and he's got to roll around in the dirt, and he's got to do this, that, and the other thing. And the nomadic pastoralists are very, very adept at skilled users and riders of horses. So much so that if you go to modern day countries whose origins, whose cultural origins can trace back to the nomadic pastoralists, or who really never broke free of that cultural construct, that cultural mold, and you go to places like Mongolia or Turkmenistan or Kazakhstan, or as maybe not so much Azerbaijan, but a lot of the stands, right? A lot of the former Soviet republics that are to the far east, sort of, I guess, north of China, east and south of Siberia, right? You see that the people over there are still riding horses, and it's said that the Mongolians, okay, this is said about the Huns, Attila the Hun, right, the ravage of Rome, and this is said about the Mongolians. This is still said about the Mongolians, that they learn how to ride a horse, right, before they learn to walk. Now that's fascinating, okay? And they've got a game over there in Mongolia, and this is a very ancient game. It dates all the way back thousands of years ago. And the game is for you to get on a horse. The men actually do this. It's a very patriarchal culture, and the more you understand about horses and riding around and fighting in combat on horses, the more you realize why that is the case. But the men would ride around on these horses, and the point of the game was to have this bow and arrow, right? So you guys know what a bow and arrow is, like Robin Hood or something. And you're on this horse and you're riding around, and you have to shoot this bow and arrow, right? You have to shoot this bow and arrow, right, while you're riding a horse at a moving at another target that is moving, right? So you're moving, the target is moving, right? And you have to shoot this bow and arrow at that target, and you have to be able to hit it consistently and precisely, right? Now I don't know about you, but that sounds like hella difficult to me. Okay, that sounds like it would really require a great deal of skill. That would require a great deal of physical conditioning and training, and a certain degree of innate aptitude at actually riding a horse. So these people are these. You don't want to mess around with these people. I mean, if they can do that, right? If they can hit a moving target while themselves moving with a bow and arrow, right, with precision and consistency, imagine what they can do when they're actually in battle, right? They've got archers on horseback, right? They got cavalry archers. They are able to go and they are able to defeat many of their enemies precisely because they are so good at riding around on horses and doing all other sorts of activities while they're on the back of the horse. Okay, why are we talking about these nomadic pastoralists and these Indo-European tribes? Well, let's mention these. The Indo-European tribes is a very brief point, but it's one that I think is important. So we'll talk about it very very quickly. The Indo-European tribes came from, well, you guys can see this map here. If you actually look at this map, it's a pretty crude map. It doesn't do a very good job at actually elucidating this point. But if you look at that map and you try to figure out what that map looks like, and it's very difficult because mine is actually in black and white because my printer's out of color ink here. So what that map is showing is that these Indo-European tribes emerged from, I would say, well, I don't have to guess at this. It says it right here on the slide. It says Asia Minor. Okay, modern day Turkey. All right, is where they came from, right? And because they were just like the nomadic pastoralists, they were a version of nomadic pastoralists, right? So these guys, these Indo-Aryans, are riding around on horses, right? And because they're traveling faster and further than agrarian societies, because agrarian societies, mind you, I should have mentioned this back when I was talking about this, but agrarian societies, in case you didn't know this, right? This should be intuitive, but they're sedentary, okay? Meaning that they don't go anywhere, all right? If you're a farmer, you're tied to the land, okay? You're an agricultural specialist, or you're living in a city, you're an urban dweller, you're a denizen of a city, one of the early cities, right? You're going to live in that city. You're going to continue to live in that city. You're not going to move out of the city and go somewhere else, right? Or if you do, you're going to live in another city, right? You're not going to get on your horse and you're just going to go ride off into the sunset and hope that you can find some sheep or goats out there and become a nomadic pastoralist. You don't do that, right? Now, so agricultural specialists, the agrarian social construct type people, right? They can't make the leap from being city dwellers, being urbanites, suburbanites, right, to being nomadic pastoralists, right? It wouldn't make much sense to them because they just wouldn't have the wherewithal to be able to do that, and they wouldn't have the skill set, they wouldn't have the aptitude for it. Now, but does that mean that it doesn't work the other way around, right? Does that mean that nomadic pastoralists are Indo-Europeans, right? Does that mean that the Indo-Europeans, who are themselves nomadic pastoralists, riding around on the horses, traveling around with their pastoral type animals that they keep, right? Does that mean that those people can't convert or transition or metastasize into agriculturalists or urban dwellers? No, it doesn't mean that, right? So it's a one-way street, right? You can't go from being an agriculturalist, right, or an agrarian type person who's out there cultivating the rice or the millet or the barley, or whatever, right, to being a nomadic pastoralist, okay? You can go from being a nomadic pastoralist, riding around on the horses, right? Going out there and exploring and adventuring and traveling around a lot and becoming very proficient at shooting bows and arrows at moving targets, right? You can go from being that, okay, to deciding, you know what? I found some really nice land here. We got some excellent grazing grass around here. I got an ecology, an environment that is highly suitable to the maintenance and sustaining of the various animals that I keep and subsist off of, right? I'm going to settle down, okay? I'm going to go from wild man riding around a horse, okay, playing sort of a rudimentary version of lacrosse is what they also play. I forget what it's called. They got this game over in Kazakhstan, but they got this, not polo. I'm trying to think of the name, but anyways, look it up. It's interesting, right? There's probably YouTube videos of it that are far more interesting than me giving this lecture. But you got to listen to the rest of this, okay? Don't go running off yet, okay? You're not done yet. I'm not done yet. And by the way, I should say, I should say, for those of you who are wondering about this, is the information, is the content you're actually articulating here in these videos, is this technically going to be incorporated into the superstructure of our curriculum within this course? Yes, this is a part of the curriculum. Yes, this is stuff that you should be attentive to and learning and listening to and taking notes from. Okay. Yes, anything that occurs in the context of these videos, because I'm taking the time to make these videos, right? And I don't particularly like doing this. I don't mind doing it, right? But I don't necessarily love talking to myself in this house, and I hate seeing myself on the video monitor, and that's one of the reasons why this is especially difficult. But I'm doing this for you guys, okay? Of course, I'm doing this for you. I'm not doing it for myself. Who else would I be doing it for, right? But I'm doing it. I'm doing it so that you can engage with the material, right, this week, because this is week number 1 technically. Okay, so you can engage with the material, and we're not going to be trying to play catch up for the next 16 and a half, 17 weeks of the semester, right? Because I hate being behind, and I typically get behind because we end up going off on different tangents and talking about all different things. But that makes it interesting. It keeps it real, and that's my motto actually, especially for history. Keeping it real is what we do in this class, all right? Even though it's virtual, even though I'm on YouTube, we're going to try to keep it real, and hopefully I'm doing that for you. Indo-European tribes. And so the point here is that the point about the Indo-European tribes is that they were nomadic pastoralists and enabled them to move very, very far, much, much quicker than the hunters and the gatherers, because the hunters and the gatherers are usually the ancient iteration of the hunter gatherers, right? Because you could say, well, what about the Native Americans, Jeff? Were they hunters and gatherers? And I say, yeah, actually they are, or they were, right? I don't think they technically still are. But if you think about certain of the Native American tribes, that's actually a very good illustration of what a hunter-gatherer type society would be like, right? What it would look like, right? How the arrangements would be in terms of how the various constituent members of that society engage with one another. And if you think about Native American, the Plains Indians, right? You think about the not the Potawatomi or the Algonquin or the Iroquois, the people that we have here in the Midwest. But if you think about the Plains Indians, the Cherokee and the Apache and the Lakota and the Cheyenne, and I can't remember whoever the hell else is out there, but there's a lot of them, right? We ordinarily consider those tribes with a great deal of reverence and awe and respect, because they were extremely efficient, right, at using everything that they could possibly use and derive from the buffalo. They would use the skin, they would use the meat, obviously, they would use the bones, okay, they would use the bones as weapons and as aesthetic accoutrements, and they would use the cartilage, and they would use all these other things, right? They would derive maximum utility from that, right? So and the reason that was the case, okay, I mean, think about that, right? What I was saying about the hunters and gatherers, right? The reason that was the case is because you got to make the most out of the very scarce resources that you actually have. Because if you don't, and you don't maximize the efficiency and the efficacy of what you have, then you're probably not going to be very good at being a hunter-gatherer, okay? And if you think about Native American culture and Native American society and the relationships that exist within it, right? It's actually fairly consistent with what I was describing last night. It is fairly egalitarian, right? Now, yes, there is a chief, right? There's a paramount chief over the entire Lakota, right? And then the various constituent tribes are subordinate to him, right? But in general, that society is much more egalitarian. It's much more fair. It's much more equal. It's much more just, some would say, right, than our society, right? This society that is multifaceted, it's multi-tiered, it's multi-structured, it's predicated on socioeconomic condition, right? And you got these vast chasms that separate people in terms of their finances, in terms of their prestige, in terms of their resources, in terms of where they're situated on the spectrum. Okay, so that's just the tip of the hat to the Native Americans, and a way of saying that we should really respect and honor the traditions that they have, because there's a very good reason as to why those traditions came into play. Okay. All right, now I'm actually going to be turning the page here, literally, into another lecture. All right, and this is actually, you guys can see this. I don't think it really matters whether or not you see this, but this is probably more important than the other slides that I was showing you guys, because you don't actually have these slides, all right? So this is the reason it says 2.2 up here is this means PowerPoint slideshow number 2. Okay, and I know I'm old-fashioned and I'm old school about this, and I still use PowerPoint. And I don't know if hopefully you don't have a problem with that, but if you do, don't say anything, because we'll have to we'll have to settle that. No, I actually I don't care. You can say whatever you want to me because I actually I don't take anything personally. So, but the point here is that we're on PowerPoint slide number 2. Okay, I'm gonna try to remember to actually send this out to you guys when I'm done doing this recording, which is hopefully gonna be soon. I'm also gonna try to, as I said, I'm gonna try to abbreviate this, and we've already moved through 2.5 slides now, and that's actually in less than an hour because I'm coming up on 50 minutes right now. So that's actually twice as efficient or twice as fast as I was going last night. Now I know there wasn't as much antics or silly nonsense and me trying to be funny in this video as there was last night, but you know what, we can't always do that because we just don't always have time for that, and I apologize, right? So if you want antics and you want escapades and you want nonsense, you want silliness, maybe I'll do that in the next video that I make. We're actually, no, we're done making videos because this is actually number 2 and I'm going to see you for number 3. So anyways, this is slide number 2 of PowerPoint slideshow number 2, which you do not have, which I'm going to try to remember when I actually send out the email that has the URL associated with this YouTube video on it. But if I forget, somebody please let me know. Okay, reach out to me and say, Jeff, you know, you're being a dumbass as always. You forgot to send that slide that you promised that you would send to us, and we have no idea what you're talking about. But actually, you don't really need this slide because there's not a whole lot on this slide. And actually, I'm going to read what's on this slide anyway. So I guess even if you don't get the slide, don't worry about it. And you're going to get it soon anyway, so who cares? All right, so what this slide says, okay, it says at the top of it, it says early societies, states, and civilizations, all right? Deja vu. Didn't we just talk about this? Well, we talked a little bit about this, but now we're going to talk a little bit more about this because this is important. So differentiate between or distinguish between these terms and understand what they imply. What is the implication, the connotation associated with these different terms? Okay, so societies, states, and civilizations. All right, so we already have a working definition of civilization because I already provided that in the last slide and I already read it to you, so hopefully you got that down in your notes. What is a society, right? So a society is the most rudimentary form of a social construct, right? A society, that's actually kind of redundant to say that because a society, by definition, is a social construct. But well, a society, as far as I'm concerned, okay, is essentially people coming together, right? People coming together for and collaborating for the mutual benefit of the group. People coming together and collaborating constructively, working together so they can produce something or so they can work on something that is advantageous for all of them together cooperatively, right? For all of them together as a group. Okay, that's a I think that's a very functional, workable, viable definition of society, right? Because it doesn't presuppose anything, right? It just says essentially you got people coming together and doing something together that's advantageous for all of them, right? Now, by that definition of society, I could say, I mean, what isn't a society, right? Let's say you got, you and your homies are rolling out on a Friday night, right? And you're going to the local bar, right, to get some drinks and to have a good time, right? Are you a society if there's 4 of you in your minivan or your whatever you're driving, right? Are you a society? Well, technically, by that definition, you got a group of people working together towards a common purpose, right? The common purpose is going out to the bar, having a good time, getting drunk. Yeah, that's a society, right? Is this class a society, right? Even if in its convoluted, virtual, unconventional format that it takes right now, is this class a society? You got some people coming together for a collective purpose, doing something that's I think you could argue that it's mutually advantageous, right? It's mutually advantageous to discover new things, to learn about knowledge and information that you wouldn't otherwise be exposed to. That's advantageous, right? We're coming together for a collective purpose. We're all partaking in this and participating. Well, maybe not participating equally, but we're participating in the sense that we're actually listening and hopefully watching and still paying attention and not sleeping right now. So yeah, this class is so there's very little that you can't say is not a society, right? By that definition, it's a very inclusive, comprehensive, and expansive rubric in terms of what it actually is inclusive of. Now, so that's a society. A state is something that requires a little bit more than just a group of people coming together and doing something that is in the interest of the group collectively, right? A state is something. A state is an organization of people that has come together and that has a common identity, right? A common national identity or a common cultural identity, right? There's something that unifies them. There's something that animates them. There's something that they can look at and say, This is what we identify as the members of this ancient state. We the Egyptians, we the Babylonians, we the Akkadians, we the Assyrians, we the Greeks, the Romans, and etc. Right? We have something that gives us some common denominator that allows us to differentiate ourselves from those other societies and from those other states and from those other civilizations. Indeed, okay. So that I would say that is the primary feature of a state. It's something, as far as we're concerned, in terms of our definitional terms, and a lot of this is just a matter of semantics, right? I mean, I'm sure you can come up with an equally convincing and compelling definition of what a state is, right? I'm not this font of wisdom and knowledge as it relates to the vernacular of anthropology or history, even for that matter. I'm just trying to spitball this and come up with something that is workable and fungible and actually makes some kind of sense. And I think that if that's the way you define states, right? You say that yes, it's more than just a group of people coming together working for a common purpose, right? It's that plus, right? It's that plus people who have a common identity, and that identity could be predicated on culture, it could be predicated on nationality, it could be predicated on religion or language, right? Or their heritage, their traditions, right? Could be predicated on a lot of things, or indeed many of those things, or indeed all of those things, right? And so that's what constitutes a state. Civilization is a little bit different, right? So you're going from the most rudimentary, right, the crudest thing that is also the most comprehensive and inclusive in terms of its definitional criteria, society, right? And then you're adding something onto that, right? You're qualifying that further, and then you go to a state, right? Because you add something on top of the basic definition, right? And then you add something further on top of, moving from society to state to civilization. Then you add something further onto the definition of state. You qualify that a little bit further, and then you say, well, this is what a civilization actually constitutes, right? So that's the development, right? That's the process of progression here that we're really looking at and trying to understand. Earliest states were theocratic. Theocratic. What is that? I'll give you a hint. It's on this slide. Okay, it's on this slide. Here, that's your hint. There's this guy that looks kind of like I don't know, a strange version of Santa Claus, and he's giving out candy to the elves there, right? Is that what he's? No, that's actually not right. That's totally not right. In fact, that would be blasphemy if I were to say that about this person. If I were to be living in Iran, I just gave you a big hint as to who this person is. He's the Ayatollah Khomeini. Okay. The founder of the modern Iranian state. Okay, and if you go to Iran right now, or in fact, if you have gone to Iran anytime since 1989, I believe was the revolution. If you guys ever watched the movie Argo, with 79, what am I talking about? I'm 10 years old. The Iranian Revolution in 1979. And there was a hostage crisis because the Iranians took over. The Iranian people themselves overthrew the Shah of Iran, who had been sort of a surrogate or a puppet for the United States, who was just our lapdog who was going over there and implementing our policy. Without the consent or the approval of his own people. And so the Iranian people said, we have had enough of this, and they coalesced around the ideology of Shia Islam, okay? And they said, we have this common identity, right? This animates our cause, that animates our revolution, and we are going to overthrow the secular regime, which is actually serving the interests of another state anyways. But this is kind of getting off on a tangent here, and it's not really relevant to what we're talking about. But the point is that Iran is not a secular state, okay? It is a sectarian state. It is a religious state. It is a theocratic state, okay? And a theocracy, by definition, if you put that word, or let's break that, let's parcelate that word out, okay? Let's break it up, okay? Let's look at the anatomy of that word, right? Theocracy, all right? What is ocracy? All right? Well, you got democracy, you got autocracy. You got a bunch of ocracies out there, right? You got theocracy, right? Ocracy just means a way in which you rule a people. Okay, that's all it means, right? Theology. What's theology? Well, theology is the study of religion, right? So a theocratic person, right? A theist is somebody who believes in God. A deist is somebody who believes in God. A theist is somebody who also believes that God intervenes in our affairs and is watching us, and we have to have some kind of system of belief that is predicated on some kind of foundational doctrine, such as a Bible or the Quran or whatever it has to be, right? You believe in religion. So theocracy just means a religious state, or a state that is governed by religion, okay? Now, why is it the case that most early societies, or most early states rather, were theocracies. Why is that the case? Think about that right now. Think about that. And I'm going to go over here to my sitting slash thinking area, because this is something that requires a good deal of consideration. Ponder this thought, reflect upon this thought, and perhaps I'll leave you with this thought, because I see I'm coming up on an hour, and I said I'm going to try to make this short today. Um, and we may see part two of this lecture, right? Which I will probably not have time to record tonight, because I've got a lot of other things. I've got stuff I got going on, and I can't really get into that because it's probably not related to academic instruction. But I may or may not put out another part of this lecture. But I think that you guys, I don't want to overwhelm you in the first week. I don't want to throw too many things at you, because you're just going to get discombobulated and disoriented, and you're going to say, to hell with this. I don't want to focus on any of this stuff because there's just too much stuff coming at me. And I know I talk a lot, or I know I speak fast. I know that people have told me that in the past. Maybe that's a problem. Maybe it's an advantage. I don't know. But either way, there's a lot that has gone on. There's a lot that has transpired in the context of both this video lecture as well as especially the one that happened last night. So think about it this way. All right, think about it this way. If you have an early state, okay, an early proto civilization, a proto empire, right, that is based around an early city, okay, let's say it's in Acadia, right, and the reason they call it Acadia, the Akkadian Empire, is because it emanated from, it proliferated out of around the area from the city of Akkad, A-K-K-A-A-D. And let's say, you've got a city like Akkad, right, or a city like Babylon, or any of those ancient cities that are still extant in Persia or modern day Iran. Why would it be in the interests of the leaders of the state to create a state that was predicated on a theological system of beliefs, that the foundation, the superstructure of the government was essentially premised on, or was an extension of, or required the validation of the belief in a god, or a series of gods, or spirits, or any sort of metaphysical proposition? Why would that be the case? Well, I think there's a couple of things going on. And I alluded to this last night, but one of the things is that people living in ancient civilizations and ancient societies and states, indeed, didn't really have much understanding of the world around them. They didn't know physics, they didn't know astronomy, or they had very crude understanding of astronomy. They didn't know, the laws of the universe as we understand them through, through the work of Einstein, through and Isaac Newton. They didn't understand any of this stuff, right? And so natural disasters were completely mysterious and completely terrifying to them, because they lived in absolute still-defying ignorance. And if you live in absolute still-defying ignorance, and you have no plausible, scientific, empirically based explanation to account for the mysterious things that are occurring around you, a bad explanation is better than no explanation at all. Okay, a bad explanation, because the human mind always searches for meaning, right? Even if we can't discern a meaning that is rational and intelligible and based on logical, objective fact, then we just go out there and we make things up for ourselves, because that gives us some comfort, it gives us some consolation, it makes us feel as though we're in control of the world around us, when in actuality we're not, right? And so I think that if you really think about this from a socio-psychological standpoint, people need to give meaning and meaning and explanation to things that were previously inexplicable and unintelligible to them, right? And if you say that, well, the reason that mountain over there exploded and there was all this lava and all this other shit flying up out of there and killing people and just making it all hellacious, the reason that happened, right? I'm not going to say I can't comprehend that. That's just mysterious, right? I'm going to say that, well, actually, there's this demon that lives down there underneath that rock formation over there, right? And he got really angry because we didn't venerate him sufficiently last night, right, in our worship service, right? And so then, therefore, we got to pray to the God, and we got to make sure that we offer sufficient sacrifices and propitiations to the gods to make sure that they're satisfied with us and they're not going to bring down hellfire and brimstone on us. So I think the more ignorant you are as a society, this is axiomatic in history. This is especially true. I think it's more conspicuous in the context of ancient history, but it's also true in even more modern iterations of history. When you look at the Middle Ages and you look at the belief in witchcraft and the sort of spiritual nonsensical beliefs that a lot of us have now debunked, right? We have categorically debunked, right? The kinds of things that the church was saying in 1500, they'd never be able to get away with saying right now. Okay. Um, and that was even more true. These early societies were much more superstitious than modern societies and modern civilizations because they had much less information available to them at that time. And the less information you have, less scientific, factual data and empirical evidence that you have, the more you just have to make things up, right? And when you're making things up, it's easy to just gravitate to the lowest common denominator, which is to say, well, yeah, it's mysterious, and if it's mysterious, it's beyond our comprehension, but alas, it must therefore be a result of the gods, because the gods work in mysterious ways, right? And so part of the reason why the gods, belief in the gods, and these were almost all polytheistic societies, they almost all exclusively believed in many, many, many gods. And I really mean like a lot of gods. I'm not talking about like, oh, there was three gods, right? I mean, there were like, sometimes there were like dozens of gods, if not hundreds of gods, right? There was a god for the trees. There was a god for the wildlife. There was a god for the rivers. There was a god for the rain. There was a god for the mountains. There was a god for the natural disasters. There was a god for everything, right? And that way, if you had a problem with cultivating the crops, right, you can go out there and you could say your prayers to and propitiate and offer sacrifices or dedications to this particular God and hope that that God would be merciful and generous and gracious to you and shine down upon you with divine providence and ensure that you had a bountiful harvest the next year. Right? That's the way this kind of worked, right? It was a quid pro quo. I go out there, I give you veneration, I give you deference, I give you adulation and worship, and in return, right, reciprocally, in return for my propitiatory activities, you, the god, right, Gozer or Zul or whoever's up there in ancient Babylon, right, you give me something back, right? You give me a fat harvest, right? You hook me up with the the young Babylonian lady that I was hoping to marry, right? You, whatever it is, right? Because there's gods of love, there's gods of lust, there's gods of all the various human emotions, there's all kinds of gods, like I said. And this is difficult for us to understand, but that's the way it was. Now, what else can you do if you're an ancient ruler? Well, this just explains what I just said there. Doesn't explain the relationship between ruling a state and the use of theocracy or the use of God, the reliance upon the belief in gods. What I just said there really goes more to the innate human predilection, our innately imbued constitutional propensity or proclivity towards the belief in gods, that we really need to believe in gods, right? Especially if we're very ignorant, we don't understand anything about science because, Isaac Newton and Galileo and Einstein and Stephen Hawking have yet to come along. We don't know anything about string theory. We don't know anything about um, quantum theory. We don't know anything about the laws of the physical universe. And so we have to make these things up to make ourselves feel more knowledgeable and put us in a position where we feel as though we have some control over these things that otherwise we are completely subjected to the mercy of the caprice and the vicissitudes of nature and the geological processes and the meteorological processes. But if you believe that there are gods that control these forces, these natural forces, well, then you can say to yourself, well, if I just go to that temple and I pray to Poseidon, right? If you're the ancient Greeks, right? You're the archaic Greeks. Before I get on my ship and I sail across the way over to Asia Minor and I besiege the city of Troy and I go and I fight against Achilles because my name is Hector, or I'm sorry, I'm Achilles and I'm from Greece and I'm going across the Aegean. I'm going to go fight Hector there in Troy, and I got to go propitiate Poseidon because he's the god of the sea, right? If that's what you believe, if that's what you believe, then it gives you some consolation. It gives you some emotional consolation, some psychological consolation when you get on that boat because you say to yourself, I offered the proper sacrifices and propitiations to the god Poseidon, and if you're a Roman, the god Neptune, because the Romans just went ahead and usurped and bastardized and borrowed and then reconfigured the ancient Greek gods, took them as their own. You go out there and you pray to those gods. So it confers upon you a certain degree of security, a certain sense of stability, a certain sense that things will actually work out all right as long as I offer the proper reverence to the gods, as long as I show the proper reverence. So that's the first reason as to why these early civilizations, these early states, were almost all exclusively theocratic, right? Because the people needed to believe in the gods to make their life more comprehensible, less terrifying, and to give them some sense of control over what it was they were actually doing on a day-to-day basis. That's reason number one, and that's a matter of fundamental human propensities. It has very little to do with the relationship between gods and rulers. So let's talk about if you're a ruler, okay? I'm the ruler of ancient Akkad, right, or ancient Babylon. And it would be advantageous for me to say that we've got these gods here, okay? We all the people who live in the city, we have these gods, and we have this temple where we go and we venerate and we honor our gods. And who are the interpreters of the will of the gods? I already alluded to this last time. Well, you've got a priestly caste, okay? You got priests, right? And what is the function of the priest vis-a-vis the gods? Well, the priest in relation to the gods is to ventriloquize for the gods, to speak. The gods speak through the priest. The priest conveys and promulgates and disseminates the divine will of the god to the people. Now, if you're in the business of ruling an ancient, superstitious, and very ignorant group of people that coalesces around a particular society, a city in ancient Mesopotamia, if you're in the business of being the ruler of those people, the king, the prince, the whoever you are, then you need to really properly understand the function of the priest. Because what you would do if you're the ruler, if you're a smart and shrewd and prudent ruler, and you want to further stabilize your rule and ensure that nobody's going to challenge you, because to do so would be something that would be imponderable. What you do to stabilize and add a greater level of security to your rules, you go out there and you ensure that you have a very good working relationship with the priests. And you tell the priests, I'm going to give you some shekels, right? Some ancient coins, right? Or some kizash in exchange for you priests interpreting the will of the gods in a way that validates and vindicates and justifies my reign and my rule and my prerogative to rule over all these people. Because if the people of your ancient, ignorant civilization believe not only that you're the king by right of inheritance because your father was king and his father before him and so on and so forth all the way back since time immemorial, right? That's important. Primogeniture, the idea that you inherit this from the people who came before you, because hey, it's all about name recognition, right? Just ask Hillary Clinton. Or ask Donald Trump for that matter. It's all about the name, right? That's important, right? But in addition to that, if you have something supplementary to that, right, which you could say, well, okay, in addition to being somebody who inherited this by right of the fact that my father was the king before me and so on and so forth, you can also say that the priests have confirmed me in my capacity as the ruler of this particular place. They have conferred upon me the approbation, the approval, and the validation of the gods. And a lot of this just, a lot of this presupposes that this is all genuine, that none of this is, there's no shadiness, and this is not sketchy, and this is not in any way disingenuous. Of course, I being rather cynical when it comes to these matters, especially because these are very, very ignorant people. They just don't know anything about really anything. I'm going to say that this is just a bunch of nonsense. And I think that the priests and the rulers, especially, were in on the joke, right? This is. I mean, it's more than a joke, right? This is a way to control people, right? And this is one of the reasons why Karl Marx, when he wrote about the function of religion in relation to society, he said that we need to expunge religion from society. We need to divest ourselves of these superstitious notions of past, because religion is a means by which the upper classes, the bourgeoisie, as he referred to it as, use to instrumentalize their will and control us, the lower classes, the proletariat, because they keep us in place, because we believe that if we offend against the laws of man, and really he was saying that the laws of man are equivalent to, or another way of saying that the laws of the wealthy and the powerful and the strong, because they actually, the laws are designed in such a way to protect those people and not necessarily the other people, right? But if we believe that offending against the laws of man is actually ipso facto an offense against the laws of God, then it's less likely that we, right, this is the argument that Marx made, but it applies with equal force to what I'm saying here in ancient civilizations, that we in ancient Babylon or ancient Akkad or ancient wherever, right, ancient Memphis, are not going to offend against the laws of man, because those laws are subsidized or corroborated or superseded, but also confirmed by the laws of gods, right? And so if the laws of man are made by a man, a king, in the ancient context, a king who has been vindicated or has been validated and confirmed in his rule and his power and his prerogative to rule by the gods, then therefore any laws and any rules and any codes that he promulgates and he issues and he mandates in his capacity as king have the authentication of the gods. So it adds another layer of certitude and security and stability to your society, because you're saying that the gods have essentially sponsored us. The gods have confirmed us, we the rulers, in our power, and they have given us this power. And this is the origins, if you trace it all the way back to its incipient beginnings. You think about the divine right of kings, right? And we're not going to get too much into this because this is kind of part 2 of this class. But if you think about in the Middle Ages, right, the kings and queens and dukes and archbishops and things like this, they had this concept known as the divine right of rule, right, which is to say that the reason Louis the 13th, the last king of Capetian France, had the conviction, the unshakable conviction that he had the right to rule the kingdom of France, wasn't merely because his father was Louis the 12th, right, or whoever, right, but it was also because he was confirmed in that position by the priests, right, by the archbishop, the cardinal archbishop of Reims, which is the cathedral there where they actually had the coronation ceremony, right. Well, that idea that you're the king, right, or you're the leader of the state, you're the hereditary leader of the state, right, and you're being confirmed, right? You're being confirmed. Here's the confirmatory process. What am I doing? Right? I'm enhancing my aesthetics by improving my style because now I got a Nike emblem on my hat, right? I'm doing that, right? But what am I supposed to be doing? Or what am I trying to do? This is my crown, right? I'm the ancient king of ancient Babylon, right? And I got the priests, right? The high priest putting this crown upon my head, conferring upon me not just the secular authority, the state, right, but also the authority to speak on behalf of and represent the interests of the gods because the gods have confirmed me in my position. And if you're a superstitious, ignorant, theistic believing citizen of one of those ancient cities in ancient Mesopotamia or ancient Egypt or all the other ancient places we're going to talk about, then you will not raise a hand against the ruler. Not because you fear the wrath of the ruler, but rather because you fear the wrath of gods. And the ruler may not be omniscient and omnipotent and omnipowerful and omnipresent, and he may not be constantly aware of what you are doing. But if you believe in the gods, you must therefore also believe that you are in a state of constant invigilation. Big brother up there in the sky is constantly watching you. If big brother is on the side of the guy who's wearing that crown up there in the big palace, then I better not offend against the rules of the guy up there, the king, right? I better not strike a hand against that king. I better not try to inspire a revolution or a revolt against him because I am therefore a priori, right? You must assume therefore I'm not just offending against the king, right? But I'm also offending against the gods who have confirmed him in his position. Okay. I'm getting tired of talking. I'm getting tired of sitting over there. And I guarantee if I'm tired of talking, you're tired of listening to me. We haven't actually finished this slide, but that's okay because we've actually gotten through enough material where I don't feel as though we're going to be behind when we actually start this class in person, so to speak, in another week from today. So this is probably all you're going to hear from me between now and what is that? The 31st? I don't know. I don't whatever that is, a week from the 24th. I think there's 31 days in August. So when I see you next, right, we're not going to be talking about this stuff. We're going to go back and we're going to reset, okay? And I'm going to be talking about myself, right, because that's what I like to do, right? No, actually, I have to talk about myself because I want to just kind of set this up and tell you who I am and where I come from and why I love history to the extent that I do. Because otherwise, you're not going to really understand me. I'm going to sound like I'm a really strange guy if I haven't already made that point very, very, very conspicuously clear to you. But no, there's actually a rhyme and reason as to why, and a method of my madness as to why I'm really infatuated with the subject of history. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that, so a little biographical narrative. But when we meet for the first time, don't worry about getting the book yet. All right, I think I already said this, but I'm going to just reiterate this, right? Because the book decision, the decision as to whether or not you're going to get the book is going to be predicated on some of the things I'm going to tell you guys when we actually see each other face to face in our interpersonal setting. Do bring one of these. Okay, it doesn't have to be this thing from Walmart or whatever, right? It doesn't have to be top flight, one subject college rule, but bring a notebook. Okay, bring a notebook, bring a writing utensil. I don't care what you write with, but bring something to write on, and bring something to write with. And shit, it's going on 5 o'clock. I gotta wrap this up, guys, because I got things I gotta do. I gotta go. My brother's actually coming over tonight. We're gonna get a gaming session in for Nintendo 64. And that's the real reason why this lecture is only gonna be an hour and 20 minutes as opposed to an hour and 40. No, that's not really. That's actually just incidental. That's ancillary. No, seriously, it is. So I'm gonna wrap this up right now, and I appreciate you guys listening. I appreciate you guys hopefully still being awake and still being lucid and still being attentive and still actually assimilating the words that I'm saying to you right now. And let me know if well, I guess at this point it doesn't really matter because I'm probably not going to make another video. But I always appreciate laudatory and complimentary remarks. I always appreciate positive, constructive feedback. Who doesn't? Okay. And when you guys actually get around to taking your first test in this class, believe you me,
I'm gonna go out of my way to say nice things, even if you're gonna end up with an F. I'll probably find a way to say nice things about what some of what you said, anyways. All right, because that's my style. That's how I roll. So I hope you appreciate that and understand that. And anyways, it's an hour and 20 minutes, so I said I wasn't gonna go any further than this, so I won't. Good luck on in the first week of your semester. I hope your the beginning of your journey at Go Back Community College is an auspicious one, and that you have a successful first week. And this is a successful first week in a long academic career, a long and illustrious one. And I'll see you guys in a week from today. Take care and be well.